You know, when you talk about the Three Kingdoms, there's one relationship that everyone points to, the bond between the warlord Liu Bei and his genius strategist Zhuge Liang. It's always held up as this perfect example of partnership, and it's all summed up in one famous, almost poetic phrase, like a fish in water. That's how people describe them. And it sounds perfect, right? It gives you this image of a flawless union, total synergy, where one can't succeed without the other, just complete and total trust.
But was it really that flawless? What if I told you that under that perfect surface, there were some serious conflicts? I'm talking about huge disagreements on strategy, on people, and on the very principles their kingdom was built on. Their bond wasn't just about harmony, it was forged in fire.
All right, let's dive right into the deep end with their biggest, most disastrous disagreement. This wasn't some friendly debate. This was a conflict driven by pure emotion that almost destroyed everything they'd built.
Okay, so look at this. It really breaks down where everything went wrong. After Liu Bei's sworn brother, the legendary Guan Yu, is killed by the kingdom of Wu, Liu Bei just sees red. His only goal? Revenge. Total, all-out war against Sun Quan. But Zhuge Liang is looking at the big picture. He's saying, wait, this is personal. Our real enemy, the one we have to beat, is Cao Pai and the kingdom of Wei. Our whole strategy has always been to team up with Wu to take down Wei.
But Liu Bei just wasn't hearing it. For him, this wasn't about strategy maps and grand plans, this was about his brother. So he completely blows off Zhuge Liang's advice, takes personal command of the army, and marches on Wu, leaving his top strategist at home. This is pure, raw emotion taking the driver's seat.
And the result? An absolute, unmitigated disaster. At the Battle of Xiaoting, his army gets completely wiped out. I mean annihilated. This single loss was so devastating, it basically crippled the kingdom of Shuhan for good. They never really bounced back from it.
So that was a case of logic versus emotion. But what about a time when the roles were flipped? This next one is all about judging a person's character, and it turns out Liu Bei's final piece of advice was spot on, and Zhuge Liang ignored it. As he's dying, Liu Bei pulls Zhuge Liang close and gives him this one last, chillingly accurate warning about an officer named Ma Su. He says, look, this guy's words are bigger than his abilities. He's a great talker, he knows all the books, but don't give him anything important to do. He's all talk, no action.
But you know what? Zhuge Liang was just totally impressed by Ma Su's intelligence. They'd sit and talk strategy for days, and Zhuge Liang thought he was a genius. So he completely forgets his lord's warning, and during the huge, all-important northern expedition, he hands Ma Su the most critical job of all, defending the vital outpost of Jiating.
And just like Liu Bei predicted, it was a disaster. Ma Su followed the book instead of the reality on the ground, and made a rookie mistake, a huge one. Jiating was lost, the whole campaign fell apart, and Zhuge Liang had to make the heartbreaking decision to execute the very man he'd championed. He supposedly wept as he gave the order. A tough lesson, for sure.
You see, these weren't just isolated incidents. There was this constant back and forth at the heart of their partnership. It was Liu Bei's unshakable moral code clashing time and time again with Zhuge Liang's hyper-practical, do-what-it-takes strategies.
So, think about it. Zhuge Liang has this grand master plan, right? But it all depends on grabbing key pieces of land to build their kingdom. The problem? Liu Bei kept getting in the way. In Jingzhou, he refused to take the province from a distant relative. Then in Sichuan, he wouldn't ambush his host, another relative, because it would look bad. For Liu Bei, being seen as a good, righteous guy was everything, even if it meant putting the brakes on the very plan he needed to succeed.
And it all leads up to their very last conversation. It's on Liu Bei's deathbed, and what he says to Zhuge Liang is so complex, people have been arguing about it for centuries. Was it the ultimate show of trust, or was it a clever trap?
I mean, just try to put yourself in Zhuge Liang's shoes. Your king is dying, and he looks at you and says, if my son isn't up to the task, you should take the throne yourself. Can you imagine? What an absolutely mind-blowing thing to hear.
So, what did he mean by that? On one hand, you could say it's the ultimate proof of their fish and water bond, just pure absolute trust. But then there's the other side of the coin. A much more cynical view. Was it actually a brilliant political power play? A kind of psychological trap?
And if you look at the evidence for it being a trap, it's pretty compelling. First, Liu Bei knew Zhuge Liang was a deeply moral man. A man like that could never take the throne from his master's son. It would go against everything he believed.
So the offer basically forces Zhuge Liang to swear undying loyalty. And get this, Liu Bei also appointed a second regent, a guy named Liang, to act as a check on Zhuge Liang's power. That doesn't really sound like someone just handing over the kingdom, does it? It sounds like a very smart king making sure his son was safe.
So in the end, that whole fish and water thing, it's a nice story, but it's not the whole story. Their partnership wasn't great because it was perfect and harmonious. It was great because of the constant push and pull, the friction between Liu Bei's heart and Zhuge Liang's head. It was emotion versus logic, personal loyalty versus national strategy.
And that kind of makes you think, doesn't it? In our own lives and our own teams, we always think perfect harmony is the goal. But maybe the real secret isn't getting rid of conflict. Maybe, just like with Liu Bei and Zhuge Liang, it's the friction, that productive conflict between different ways of thinking that really creates something amazing. So, what's more important, perfect harmony or a little bit of creative fire?